Hi, my name is Shlomi Ron. I'm a co-founder at the Visual Storytelling Institute based here in Miami, Florida. We help business leaders articulate, visualize, and distribute their business stories so they can connect better with the audiences and grow faster in their companies. So with that, I know that a lot of you are struggling with the challenge of connecting better with audiences. So for this episode, I decided to invite a guest that it's outside of the traditional marketing space that I typically interview. And I have the great pleasure to invite Yasmine Kotb. She's the owner of Mina Mediterraneo. One of the great success stories in Miami's cuisine landscape. So with that, welcome to the show, Yasmine.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Great. Wonderful. So what we normally do is maybe if you can, since, as I mentioned at the top, typically I interview folks with more marketing backgrounds. Maybe you can give us your backstory, what inspired you to become a chef or restaurant owner? What's your backstory?
Well, the backstory is that the restaurant is inspired by family recipes. They're specifically my mother's recipes. My parents owned a restaurant that they opened after me and my sister both graduated university. So we were out of the house. It wasn't something we necessarily grew up around, but we did grow up around food being very kind of important part of our culture, traditions. So, so that's sort of why I chose this sort of cuisine. And the business side of it, I guess after working for others for, the first part of my career after university, I worked in the music business for about 15 years and then decided I wanted to work for myself. And I just didn't have any other ideas as to what I would do. So
Right.
the fact that my parents had a restaurant that they had running, and I helped them sort of renovate the space and open up. I wasn't, I went in and out. I would kind of help them so they could go on vacation. I didn't necessarily have a background in restaurants either, but I had access to the recipes. I had access to advice from them. So it was sort of the idea I had, and I wasn't afraid to take on a space and turn it into a restaurant. So so that's sort of what got me into the restaurant business.
When we talked, I know that you mentioned earlier that you have a background in journalism, right?
I have a degree in journalism. I wouldn't call it a background. I mean, I graduated from University of Texas with a bachelor in journalism, specializing in PR, and a minor in business. But I would say that, and since graduating, my particular story is that I have never had to present that degree to anyone, or have I used it's not been a vocational degree. I mean, I think that basically I completed a degree which made me very happy.
And then you moved to the music business. You told me you ran a road shows for major artists, right? Musicians.
Yes. So I was a tour. I mean, I started as a lighting technician, and then I became a tour accountant. And I toured with a lot of different both solo artists and bands, and sort of dealt with the financial aspect of their touring business throughout the world. And so it was a lot of movement, and it was a lot of, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I miss it sometimes. There's some things I don't miss, and some things I miss a lot. So, but I thought I sort of ran into a time where I felt that it had sort of run its course, and I got the best out of it that I could get, and I felt like it was time for a transition. And so, so the restaurant was, it sort of felt like something I could get into without a lot of history or knowledge of the business, other than being a consumer of it. I mean, living on the road, I was constantly living in hotels and eating all my meals out. So I was always, I really was a nonstop consumer of restaurants. And I was always I think operationally, and maybe because my parents, once I started touring, had a restaurant, I sort of paid attention to them when I would be there. I mean, I didn't of course, sometimes if you're in a business meeting, you're very focused on what you're talking about. But otherwise, I would like to go out to eat. I enjoyed nice restaurants, and I usually paid attention to um, to what was going on in my surroundings when I was at a restaurant. And I would normally, I just sort of, I think I always did take it in, like why is this one working? Like it's so busy, and others that don't. I sort of always kind of paid attention to those trends.
Do you remember any this magical moment where really you kind of realize, yes, that's what I want to do, and after maybe looking for a job in other fields, maybe what was kind of your
I didn't
decision
really.
moment?
The decision was I decided. The music business is an interesting one. I would say that I think probably just a bad experience in it that just opened my eyes to it being time to make a shift. I think like many people, the changes sort of, I think had everything always been so great, I probably would never have. But I think a couple of incidents opened my eyes to the fact that I could have continued. I was doing quite well. I was definitely young for what I was achieving, but I felt like it might have run its course for me and my personality.
I see.
And I thought that I'm the sort of person that when I do something or work on something, it truly takes all my attention and all my mind space to figure out how to optimally make it work financially, to make something the most money. And so after kind of seeing that I was doing that for other people and always thinking about how to make them more money out of what they were working on, it was maybe time to do it for myself somehow, while I still had kind of youth and energy and my lack of a better word, but like hunger, drive, So
Right.
I thought
No,
it was probably time to make a transition into thinking about ways to work for myself and putting how I worked, which was a little quite intensely and constantly towards making my own future and retirement better instead of other people. And so
that was your first venture that you are starting a new business on your own, or you had other past experiences?
Oh no, I've always, I worked for, I really, other than working, throughout university, I did a little bit of bartending and waiting tables, but then as soon as I got into the music business, which was as a stagehand, as an intern as well for a local promoter in Austin, Texas,
right.
I knew I wanted to be in the music business, and I specifically enjoyed the live music aspect. So, and the touring shows. So I always, that, from age 18 on, that's what I did. So I worked, I was freelance in that I worked for different bands or different promoters who would buy tours. And I wouldn't say, I didn't really work I was freelance, but I did work for people.
I see.
And that was really all, that's all I did. And when I just sort of, when I had the epiphany or, the realization, I stopped accepting tours. And while I got a real estate license to look for the space, I took some time to help my sister start up her own company. And then after that was up and running, I sort of, kind of went back.
Sounds like you're a family of entrepreneurs.
I guess so, yeah. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it is what it is. So then that was it. So this is my first venture, and
Well, that's awesome. That's fantastic. So it sounds like you had some bad experience in the previous job, and you were looking to find. You saw it as a signal for you to kind of look for the next opportunity for you, and most likely you looked around things you like to do, and obviously since you had this experience with the working, helping your family with the restaurant, I guess that definitely helped kind of pave the decision. So can you describe like the first days of how it all kind of came together?
Oh, well, the restaurant, well, I guess it started with the space. The space, I found an old abandoned warehouse, which in itself was
And
a
why Miami, by the way? How did you end up in Miami?
I fell in love with it on tour.
Oh, I see.
Maybe like 10 years before. I really, we had a few days off here on one tour, and we were in South Beach, and it was like 2003. So it wasn't super busy or touristy. It was certainly changing. It wasn't what it was maybe 10 years prior, but it was on that transition. But it felt like it was very, like, the beach was beautiful, and I love the beach. But it was a major city, which I'd never really spent much time in Miami. I spent more time in London or New York at that time, New York City.
Because you grew up in Texas, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Texas, and I spent more time while touring and working in the music business in New York or Los Angeles. So then came Miami, and I appreciated its. It felt like a little bit of an island meets a major city. You have an island mentality, which I felt was kind of cool because it slows people down. Yet you had the amenities of a major city, and the airport, and and the movement. And I assumed, the culture, and because you would hear different languages all over the place besides Spanish, obviously. But I guess because I was in South Beach, the tourists and people were coming from all over the world, so I appreciated that without the cold weather. Yeah. I didn't like cold weather, so I appreciated that. I felt Los Angeles was, I've always liked it, but I don't know. I wasn't drawn to live there. I had moments where I thought I was going to live there, but so I had bought a condo here while I was on tour, and decided that when I sort of retired one day, tired of the music or whatever, this was where I would want to come to. And then the city is still young, and it was then too. I felt like, unlike
5 years ago, right?
Yeah, 6 now. 6 from when I bought the space. It felt like the kind of place where there's a lot still lacking, which meant that there was opportunity for people. It was, relative to other major cities, inexpensive. It wasn't cheap. I mean, things weren't certainly not cheap, but for, coming from Texas, it was expensive. But spending time in Los Angeles and New York, it was not expensive. Absolutely. So, again, so relative to those cities, it seemed like there was more opportunity. There was a lot left to be done. I think that it gets a lot of attention because it's the beautiful beaches. But I thought that there was still, it was, other than hotels, hospitalities, I really didn't know much about its financial or, I knew there was a port, I knew there was a big business financial district, but I didn't know much about Miami. I've learned a lot more, obviously, once I made my, built the restaurant, has spent the last 6 years here, but it just felt like there was room for people that didn't have a lot of money to come and do something. It's been, I've learned since, it's definitely a tricky market. But that was, the draw was the beaches. I think we're all sort of seduced to this city based on we're surrounded with the beautiful water, the weather. Those of us who come from warmer climate cultures can maybe identify with it as just a terrain to be on, in a place that, I mean, being from Egypt originally, it's familiar to me, but within the U.S., because I wouldn't want to live in Egypt anymore. I mean, I didn't grow up there, so I don't have enough familiar with how to navigate like I am in the U.S. growing up here. Right. So I guess it just sort of made sense to me.
Right, and you picked North Miami, which is a kind of a very interesting urban area in Miami for the restaurant. And I've visited your restaurant many times, and definitely, I can see that you invested a lot in the complete revamp of the space of the old warehouse. It's definitely has a feeling of a kind of an upscale bistro. So I was kind of wondering, since we are a show about visual storytelling, and visuals is really important, any visual cues that you took to heart in particular as you were kind of designing the space?
The space, it turned out to be a really cool building that I didn't realize. What I liked about it, it was affordable, which is really why I came to North Miami. I mean, the dream and the sort of the dream is to be on the beach, right? Like that's what drew me here. I really would have loved to open a restaurant on the beach, near the beach,
Yeah.
near the ocean, live right there, you know, like be a few blocks away. You have these thoughts of going to the beach
Right.
if you have a break or a little hour here or there, but it was too expensive. So I had to look elsewhere,
Yep.
which what led me to this part of Miami. I truly, you know, I told you I got the real estate license so I could look for the space. And I found this building, and what I loved about it is how, well, it was freestanding, which meant I could build a garden. And I think being from Texas, it had a huge parking lot, which I appreciated.
Yeah, it's
Like,
very.
because everybody owns a car, and I
It
think
is.
that it made me feel like, okay, that will give me like a chance. Like, because if it's convenient for people, they will at least try it.
Yeah.
It's not in any kind of, there's no foot traffic, there's no natural or organic, any kind of traffic in the sense of people.
And you have to actually pick your place in particular and know about
It's
it.
a destination, yeah.
Yeah.
But visually, when I was designing it, what I discovered when we started to peel the layers of neglect off, which this place had been abandoned for decades, nothing had been done to it, and boarded up, we found these really beautiful old warehouse windows, which made me have to shift my kitchen from being in the back, which is where the windows are, to the front, which is street side. So that sort of had something to do with the design, but also the thing I would say is lighting. At night too. I've never been one to understand a super bright restaurant. I don't like bright spaces. Maybe that's just me. But I mean, maybe too, I worked as a lighting technician, so I worked with lighting designers for these shows, and maybe that I have a little bit of background in that. So sort of designing a space where the lighting was important, which I don't think a lot of people really put as much importance into that. Just like, you don't, setting that up, a place that's comfortable so that it's not, it doesn't feel too fancy, you know, like the white linen, so it's accessible to people. And then it's large, so you can have gatherings without feeling like you're taking over the space or you're intruding on everything else in the restaurant. I guess those are sort of the things that I would think about, because traveling around on tour, I mean, these were A-list artists, so we would be invited, or we would go to nice places. You know, on my time, we would normally be in the middle of town, so we were surrounded by some of the better restaurants and cafes and cities. We would sometimes go out to eat in groups of 15, 20 people. So I took all those sort of experiences in, and always sort of, I think in design, I knew what I liked as a consumer and what I appreciated when I went out to eat. And I think the setting and the lighting and, you know, of course the food, I mean, those are obvious things, right? You have to have good food, good service. I mean, those are everybody has.
It's interesting that you mentioned the lighting, because I actually noticed it in a big way, especially the big window that's just behind you. During, you know, the afternoon sun, when sun starts to set, that window is pretty much turned into an artwork in terms of the
Yeah, actually, there's some shadows.
You know, the shadows that kind
yeah.
of, and patterns that you kind of makes it unreal. So I'm kind of interested to know if that was intentional or.
Well, the way the windows behind me aren't the big windows that we have, which are warehouse. I mean, I can show you. You're going to get a lot of like blinding. But you see, those are the kind of warehouse windows.
Absolutely.
Those actually face north, so we never get a sunset, which was actually, I mean, this was really well designed. It was built in the 50s. So for the first 8 months, we didn't have any air conditioning here. We left those windows open. So we left them open, and it never got hot in here. And partially because the windows are on the south and the north side, not east and west. So there's never any direct sunlight coming into the building. Those shadows and stuff outside just happen to be from me planting a perimeter of trees along the west side. So when the sun sets on the west side, those trees, like they hit the wall. Yeah, I mean, you know, those are like fun discoveries, you know, as you do things. I would say I definitely was not.
Oh, it was an accidental surprise.
Yeah, I'm not designer enough to think of that, but yeah, that was cool. Yeah, but that was just a cool addition. Yeah, no, I mean lighting, because, you know, we're predominantly open at night. So the lighting was more about the evening time. I know that for sometimes, you know, now that everybody has a flashlight on their phone, you see a lot of people get their flashlights to read the menu, which I'm sure is a little bit annoying. But then, I mean, if you think about it, once you look at the menu, you make your order, that's 5-10 minutes of your evening, and the rest is 2-3 hours of sitting
Sure.
there. And I feel that softer light. It's just, and I think that's one of the reasons we tend to have a longer time. People, when they come, they sit for a long time.
For a long time.
We
You
don't
think
get a lot of in
lighting.
and out. Yeah, and I think that's the comfort. You know, the seats. I would say we actually padded the seats more. They were not hardwood. They're not like, you know. I guess things like that. You know, that small details that I kind of, again, as a constant consumer, paid attention to and tried to input. Well, you know, because I don't have any kind of background in design or.
No, that's fantastic. I
space.
mean, so you basically wore the customer hat in previous experiences and basically try to apply it to your business. That's great. And when we talked earlier, we also said that you didn't invest much in advertising to get the word out, but you got success just the same. So can you think of, you know, what might be the reasons? What are the things that you've done that you think?
Well, I think that you know, like I was telling you, I first I didn't advertise because I didn't know what to expect, and I honestly, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I actually didn't want a lot of people at the beginning if we weren't ready for it. So at first I thought, let's just see what happens, because we have to
More organic flow, basically.
We're gonna have to work out our kinks. So if we like try and make this a big deal and get hundreds of people in the door, but then we fall on our faces because we haven't worked out our kinks, and it won't be good. So I sort of just wanted to open the doors quietly, through just, I mean, you know, I would say I own a home in the neighborhood. I'm on the, you know, I was on the association. I would tell people around, the other business owners that were near this, because during construction, which was a year long because of zoning, I had a lot of issues with the city. So in that time, you know, I was always here, and I was going to the places around here and talking to business owners, and people would come around and be curious about what we were doing here. So I think just by being in the very surrounding neighborhood, I'm not a big networker. I mean, I didn't have business cards. I didn't go around. I didn't talk about it, but I just got to know the people around. And so when we opened, I had a small friends and family night, just to invite people so we could test our systems out. You know, it was like a free of charge type of thing. Just come, and that gave us our first boost.
Kind of a pilot.
Right. And then we opened, and I was quite frankly pleasantly surprised by the turnout. It was just enough. It was, you know, a little bit hairy at times for us. It was a little busier than we anticipated, but I guess I was quite happy with how we were starting. And what I found was, you know, and this is what I was telling you, I think that as an owner, and this is for the restaurant business, I think people appreciate sort of meeting and knowing the face behind it. I think in a world now that's set up where people you know, like there's so many chains and so many corporations sort of opening up, most establishments people frequent. I think so when something opens up by a single person, you know, or a small like, you know, I guess mom and pop is sort of the word that people come up with. I don't go there because this isn't like a mother and father, right? But
yeah, sure.
You know, so I think like when something is individually owned and that individual is there, and they speak to that individual and see them and get to know them a little bit, you know.
It's like going to their home almost.
Yes,
right?
and that's the feeling, you know, and this is truly my mother's recipes, right? So you're eating the same food that when we had dinner parties as a kid with family and friends. This is that same food. So it really is like coming to my home. And so I think that was sort of what kept the business going and growing, because people who came, at that time, you know, my mother was actually here helping me for those first 9 months. So she was in the kitchen a lot, all the time. So it helped me not have to be in the kitchen because I had faith that there was quality control back there. So let's call it, you know, she's the chef, right? So I had a chef who doesn't really get any better. You can trust them. They want you to succeed because they're your parent. So I was very lucky, you know, so she's back there making sure everything is consistent and good, and also a fellow perfectionist, you know, so I could go in the front and get to know the people who were coming in. And so I think that led to that. I think that what that does is, first, they were all neighborhood people because we weren't trying to reach out to tourists or other parts of Miami. So they were from this area. And so then they were excited that something was opening in a part of town that isn't considered sexy, still not really considered sexy. and yet they actually had there's disposable income in this area, but nowhere to go. So I think they appreciated that somebody put a little effort into the build out of the restaurant, the design, the food, the like a little bit higher quality than maybe there wasn't much of that around here.
Yeah, I
So
think that that particular cuisine is a little bit unusual for Miami. I mean, mostly you see Cuban and, I mean, there's
South
some
American,
variety, South
right?
American, but yeah, so Middle
Yeah,
Eastern or Mediterranean, it's really kind of here and there.
right. And that goes back to this city having like there's still room for growth and room for people to come and do things. Yeah, so I think that people just wanted to see it succeed. And I think by getting to know the owner a little bit and seeing it and seeing the genuine sort of desire to make people happy and to make something work, then because they enjoyed their experience, on top of that, they then wanted to bring their friend or have their child's birthday or a post baptism lunch
Right,
or like so right away my regular customers within the first few months and years came, and then they'd encourage their friends to come and have meals here or have get-togethers here. Local community organizations started to, like it was like a give and take. We would donate
right.
stuff, and they would start to have functions here. But I think that being that involved as an individual owner, um, and them hearing the story of how this restaurant was built, where like when you go talk to them and they ask, of course, because the building's unusual unusual for the area, I should say. We're not in
Right.
Chicago or New York or
Yeah.
London, so when they would have questions about the building and how they've never noticed this building before, and how did I come here, and hearing my mother was in the kitchen, and so I think them hearing the story of it was just as exciting as the food they were eating, or just as interesting, or just as something that was made
That's
them want to come back.
fascinating. That's fascinating, and that's a fantastic, description because for our audience that are interested in visual storytelling, we typically say that sometimes you are going to be more intrigued to a product or a service once you know the story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your story kind of proves several elements here. One is that the importance of human connection, because you invested a lot in getting to know your customers. And two, obviously the quality of the food is a given, as you said, but what helped you as well is that you picked a niche that it's not that popular in Miami. So automatically you get differentiation in the marketplace. It's something different that most people haven't tried yet. And I think that combination, that they get to know you as a human being and know your story, enjoying food that's unusual for the region, I think it's definitely, I see what happened in terms of the word of mouth, how people heard and kind of spread the word about the restaurant and make it a success. So I guess that's a lesson for any business leader that is looking to start. Definitely pick a niche that is not heavily occupied, and two is that really spend on ways of how you can humanize the relationship with your audience, because the more they know you on a very human level, the good and the bad, that's where the connection or the empathy will be created with the audience, and they're going to appreciate the experience more. And once you got them, obviously they are going to become an evangelist on your behalf for
Right.
their friends. So
Mm-hmm.
that's great.
Yeah.
Any particular great lesson from a failure along the way?
I mean, it's a funny thing, because I don't know. I don't really know what that there is a failure, because we're still here. So I don't know, but like I guess if I were to think of failure, like
Mm-hmm.
if you tried to say launch a happy hour, make it popular,
Mm-hmm.
I would say sometimes I don't know if it's because I would blame it on the location. It's a very residential area.
Right.
So I would say, oh, it's not going to do well for happy hour because there's no businesses, so people don't leave and want to go. So I guess I stopped trying in that sense, right?
Mm.
So I mean, maybe that's good or bad. I don't know. I'm a hard worker, but I'm not like a hustler. I'm not somebody who will push
You're gonna
something
push for
because I
something,
just
yeah.
want to see them because I'm insistent that it works. Now, I sort of see what will work, what's already naturally working, and see how you grow that as opposed to finding all the
Venturing.
different ways to make it work so that it grows so much, right? Because of course, that's the
Mm.
people want happy hour, for example, because it's the quiet time. Because people
Right.
tend to go out to eat after 7:38, so that's why they try and lure people in between 5 and 7 because they have to be there because they're open then. It would be weird to open a restaurant at 7:30 or 8. That's just too late. Because you have some people that want to come in earlier. You have your staff there, so people just want to start filling the room faster. But so I guess I sort of when I see something doesn't work, I kind of keep it moving and see and sort of focus on what does work. So as far as failure in this industry,
Is it a dish maybe or something that you tried?
yeah, I mean, I think I track that too in the sense that it disappoints people, but sometimes when something doesn't sell well, because it needs to be fresh, so you don't want
Right.
to keep throwing it out. You take it off the menu, which then again I have a lot of regular customers, so you're going to disappoint a couple of people who did like it, but they're not enough to continue making it. Especially we have a large menu because we have, we didn't want to just make it Middle Eastern, so we covered the region and that we have the pastas and the pizzas to
Yeah, yeah.
represent Italy. We have a few French dishes. We have a few, so it's a large menu. So when you start to see what doesn't work or what's redundant, you in 5 years I've streamlined it slightly. We haven't changed much, but you sort of see things just to again to optimize the operation to make sure that it flows
The
because it's
logistics. Yeah.
so I would say that it's and restaurant employees are harder work than I imagined. So, just in the
I
sense that
bet.
they come and go. I came from a world of professionals. Professionals, not necessarily because they have degrees and wear suits, but professionals in that they took their careers very seriously. Their reputations were immensely important, or they wouldn't get another tour, right? So everybody was freelance
Yeah.
in the sense that you get a tour. It may last 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 months, but if you're not good and if people have anything negative to say about you, people don't want to take you on because you essentially live and work together. So
Right, right.
everybody really took their job seriously, did the best they
Excellent.
could, and usually excelled to get to that degree. So I would say, and I'm still struggling with the shock of the different sort of
Styles of.
mentality that people have in this sort of work. I mean, and it is what it is. You're working with people that, like this isn't a career. It sort of feels like it, for most people, this is a transition stage. Um,
Something else.
like the kitchen folks are probably the only ones that this is like their job and they'll be here for years, and they have been, most of them. The front of house changes. So you're constantly having to train people over and over, which I would say as a not patient person, which I'm not, I guess I'm finding that to be one of the more challenging aspects of
Right.
this industry. But that I maybe didn't think through or didn't think was going to be a big deal, and maybe overall it isn't. But I would say that's one of the most frustrating things. So it's hard to. I don't think failure because I think, like I said, I don't have such a
Lessons
strong
learned.
intention. Yeah, I think I don't have such a strong intention towards something that, like, if it doesn't happen, I feel like I failed. I sort of feel like if something didn't work out, it wasn't supposed to, so I'm meant to just find another thing, or if I don't like it. But yeah, the lesson learned that I'm still learning and still trying to figure out how I navigate my own personality was definitely employees. I've never had them before.
Yep.
I had peers and coworkers and a team that I was a part of. Um, even when you're at the higher end of that team or whatever, you're still all working together. Having
That's a
employees
difference.
is a different situation,
Absolutely.
and having the kind of employees who can go get another job at a restaurant down the street if they leave here, because we don't restaurant folks don't check references. They don't, there's that whole like reputation and your work speaking for itself. It doesn't apply here. So that was a bit of it's something different to deal with, which I'm still navigating. So this 5 years in, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So, I think that's probably the
No,
biggest
absolutely.
challenge
Yeah, for
for me.
sure. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is definitely something that it's a challenge for any restaurant business. Um, but speaking about on the positive side, any moment or time when you remember where you exceeded your customer expectations with something that really blew them away, and it could be a small things that you've done, but it had such an immense impact.
I mean, we're always striving to do, this is the hospitality business. People sort of,
Hmm.
this is like a world where people kind of walk in the door highly entitled to a perfect experience. And
Right.
if they're slighted on in any way, whether it's anybody's fault or not, or, whoever's, it can go horribly wrong no matter how many good things are
Sure.
great. The one bad thing will take over. So it's
Absolutely.
a tough world, like, so you're sort of always having to try
You
and
have one lifeline in
yeah,
essence,
yeah. So
basically.
you're constantly trying to go above and beyond. I think the most feedback, I mean, I don't know, because when people compliment me, I don't take them in very well. I sort of brush them off fast. So I think the fact that we have so many people who continually return, and tell people about us is sort of
Mm.
maybe my sort of, maybe that's what tells me that they are feeling like they're getting good service and good food, and it is a little bit above and beyond.
Right.
And then the events, I would say, we've had several weddings here now,
Oh,
and those people, you see them again coming back. I've seen people get married, then get pregnant, and have kids, and have the baptism here, and this is just in 5 years. You're already sort of seeing the evolution of your local neighbors' lives.
oh, that's
And
amazing.
they feel very connected to the space because they got married here, or had a date here, and then they came back later and got married here, or got married in life, but one of their first dates was here, and they became regulars, and then now their kids. And so I would say, like, that's probably one of the more gratifying aspects of it, of being like a neighborhood restaurant, not a big fancy, say, South Beach tourist restaurant, but somewhere in a neighborhood where people live and stay and are here year round for decades, and have actually grown up in this city or moved here and settled in this part of town. So I think that when people sort of have a good experience, and then want to hold like such a large memory filled event here
Hmm.
like that, or a large birthday, whether it's their 50th or 60th or 40th or whatever, and they have a lot of friends and family, of course, we always want to make sure those events go really perfectly for them, and make it so that they don't have no regrets about making this choice. And
Hmm.
most of the time, they're complimentary about their experience, and which is the only thing I would ever accept, right? So, um, so it's a tough one, because I mean, the only expectation I have of myself and our team is that that just has to go perfectly. Like, we don't say no. This is a customer driven business, and even when we have reasons to have our own policies in place, because you just have to have them to make sense in a world like everybody needs a little bit of black and white. Usually they don't apply to the customer if a customer insists on something different.
Right.
Because you just have to, when again, that
Absolutely.
that comes with the entitlement walking in, because if it's not you, if it's not like I'm FPL, right? I
Sure.
don't like FPL can have horrible customer service.
Right.
Well, if I want light, I only have FPL to choose from. So,
Yeah, yeah,
whereas with a restaurant, I mean, if I'm not perfect for you, or if I don't do everything exactly like you want, you'll never come back, and you've got 1,000 choices, within
absolutely.
15-minute driving distance, which makes it that, the only thing that you have no choice but to go above and beyond, in my opinion, right? You have to do that. That's the
Right.
only way you'll last
Yeah,
in this business.
I agree. I
You
agree.
give anybody the sense that they're not important, or what they want doesn't matter because you have others. I can't imagine that it would even survive. I'll serve people food if they come in 15 minutes after we close. Um, Whatever I can serve. If we've turned everything off, I'll offer a salad or dips and a pita or something, but I won't say we don't have anything. Because that's just, I don't know. I mean, and that maybe comes from my father
Mm.
specifically, who has that sort of hospitable gene, and that comes from him. Like, that's definitely, and my mother too. She always wants everyone to be happy, but he is very, like, watching him in his restaurant, like, the customers are so important. Um, and he has very similar operation. They have my parents have a very similar operation, like that, you know, where it's very neighborhood friendly community. They've been there 20 years. They're
Oh,
very celebrated in their neighborhood.
that's awesome.
So yeah, so I mean, I think that comes from that, you know, like so, and that's probably why I chose this. You know, I mean, I had that guidance, I had that sort of mentorship where I saw how they thrive, and a lot of it is, you know, he has the same thing. He's there all the time, you know,
Yep.
talking to all the customers, making them all feel like they're at home and they're welcome and they're the most important people in the world, and you know, in that moment that he's with them. So
That's fantastic. So if you need to kind of, you know, wrap up our conversation with your top 3 tips for, you know, any business leader who would like to connect better with their audience or customer, what would you say?
I mean, you have to meet them, you know. I mean, like, you know, it doesn't matter how many employees you have, you know, it's important to know them, to know who's out there. I say that sometimes now I don't do it as often because I've been in, you know, and I think I told you this when we spoke, since my mother left, I spend more time in the kitchen because the food is very important. It's kind of difficult to
That's the
maintain.
brain. That's where it's
Yeah.
all coming from.
So I'm not out there as much, but I think that the time I invested, say the first year and a half of doing that, is what helped. But I think that meeting people goes such a long way, no matter how much staff you have or manage. Because I don't have a manager, so that's part of it too. I think getting to know your customers truly, like meeting them, finding out their needs, hearing the feedback of what they like and what they don't like about the
Right.
space, or about the service is really important. I mean, I think that, you know, there's social media. I'm not very good at it. We don't have, you know, I think we're like at 2,500 followers. So I see
Yes.
places that opened last month and they have 10,000 already. I don't know what they're doing because I don't come from that world. You know, you heard
Right.
how we open, but
Yeah.
I think we stay engaged still.
Mhm.
Because, you know, we do a newsletter, not very frequently. Really, when there's something major to announce, you know, to remind people,
Sure.
Mother's Day or you know, Easter, or you know, if we have live music to tell people who's playing. So I think people do need to kind of sort of get a little reminders that you exist even when they know you. So I think that maybe helped a little. But yeah, I mean, I truly think that, you know, and I don't know, it's hard to speak for other businesses, but I think that when people have time, you know, they get a little face time with the end all be all to it, right? The owner,
Yep.
and they kind of they get to be heard, or they're seen, and they speak to them, and there's a little dialogue or something about what they're experiencing with your service. I think that goes a long way for their loyalty.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I
So,
think
you know, and I just don't think that will ever change. You know, I mean, we're definitely like dehumanizing a lot of things with technology and
yeah.
with corporate growth. You know, that is sort of making lots of things faceless, like enjoyable. You can go. I mean, I don't only eat at restaurants with single individual owners. I
Sure.
probably do that more than others, but you know, we're even getting to a point where single individual owners are opening up 4 or 5 restaurants, right?
Yeah.
Which then separates them again, right? You know, it's not like their first one that they opened where they were there all the time. So I
Absolutely.
think that we're in a world where that's just what everybody's getting used to it. But I think that people, you know, we're still human and we still appreciate that aspect of things.
No, this is great. And I think, you know, what you said about getting to know your customer is absolutely on point, and you definitely prove that, you know, in the way you address your customers. And the second thing is really, you know, the human connection. You know, how can you create opportunities to connect with your customer that are going beyond just you know, indirect communication, face to face, in person, and provide like a stage for your customer to kind of express themselves about how they feel about your service, and that's how you can elevate the relationship. Obviously, it's a one-on-one kind of interaction, but on top of it, I think the third thing you said is that definitely make sure to continue remind your audience remotely about your latest and greatest stuff you're working on, and that's definitely something that you don't want to disregard as well.
Right.
Well, this is great. So thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. You have really an amazing journey that with fantastic story ending, hopefully more to come. And if our viewers and listeners would like to contact you, if they have any questions, how can they contact you?
They can reach me at either info@minasmiami.com or my first name, Yasmine, Yasmine, at minasmiami, all one word, MINAS, Miami.com. That's the fastest way. Call the restaurant, leave a message. That's the other way. Because I'm pretty much almost always here, and if I'm not, then the message will make its way to me. So,
fantastic.
You know, I'm pretty easy to find.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. All right. And have a wonderful day, and we'll see everybody the next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, have a good day.